This spring practice is going to be key for Florida State staying on track and becoming a dominant program.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Is Florida State ready to be the hunted and not the hunter? Basically, Florida State is now going to be circled under everybody's calendar above all else. 13-0 will get you that, which is a good thing. But that's for the 2023 team, and every year starts anew. Spring practice is getting started, and Florida State has to find a way to get over that hump and be mentally prepared, even more so for each game they play than they were last year. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Smith. Thank you for coming to check out Locked On Seminoles. You can find us wherever you get your podcast for free and on YouTube, part of the awesome Locked On Network. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Here's the key to this show. There's two main areas: replacing elite players, which we all know, but the mentality that goes with it. One could argue on their own, that's a whole nother show, which one's more important, but I happen to think they're somewhat intertwined, and I've got my notes and stats over here that I'll go over, but we need to talk about it from a direct perspective first. Everybody wanted to know that I've spoken to about who's going to replace Keon Coleman, talk about Johnny Wilson, obviously Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, but there are a lot of other key cogs to it. And Florida State football is like anybody else. When you lose guys like that, Jared Verse on defense, etc., there can only be so many players that can really take that role emotionally, as a leadership standpoint, and statistically. Sometimes you got to do it in combinations. Here's my example. If you take nothing else, understand this, because college football is so much more complex than the NFL right here. We're not dealing with completely mature adults yet. A lot of these people are 18 to 20. How mature were you at 18 to 20? Are you going to be mentally 100% dialed in each and every week? We all know that's a rhetorical question. For whatever you were doing at 18 to 20 years of age, probably not. As the kids get a little bit older, 21, 22, 23-year-olds, it's a little easier. But you're still going to have a hard time replacing somebody like Jared Verse. I'm just going to use him as an example. He had 9 sacks last year out of the 46 Florida State had. That's just a little bit less than 20%. But here's the key. Other teams had to prepare for him, chip him, double him, run away from him, do a lot of different things that made it almost impossible for him to be, quote unquote, equal to somebody else on Florida State's line. Because if he'd have been single covered as much as everybody else, he'd have been around 15 sacks. The other team knew it. Florida State knew it. We all knew it. That's a difference maker, and he can help guys along. His leadership and how he trained and how he prepared, from everything I heard, also adds to that value. It's not one or the other. It's both, which the answer is almost always both in football, that you need to have an elite team. Sometimes guys just go after stats. That doesn't mean they're good, because sometimes those stats come in bulk games. Teams have a really bad right tackle or left tackle, and that defensive end kills them. Great, he got 4 sacks. He didn't get any sacks against their best 3 teams on the schedule. How valuable was that guy? This is a player that impacted each and every game. So that's going to be the kind of the theme here. Let's talk about it from an emotional standpoint, and I'll throw in some stats as we go along. And since I'm on defense, we're going to go there first. The other guy that I think a lot of people kind of forget, like especially with the Clemson game, the sack, the strip, the fumble, the scoop, the score. Kalen DeLoach can be that guy in a play that kind of changed the season. Does Florida State win the game at Clemson if the Noles do not play that play exactly like they did and everybody else? The coverage was good. Obviously, Cade would probably like to have that play back. He held the ball way too long. But it happened, and Florida State ends up winning. Sometimes, I mean, Kalen's a good player, but you just rise to the occasion in a key moment that can't even be put into finite terms. And his leadership was key too, because they had a lot of younger guys that weren't really ready per se to play at linebacker. He played a lot of reps. DJ Lundy was the one guy who came off the bench. It's like they didn't have a ton of depth there, and he found a way to get it done in key moments on the field for him and other guys. He had 7 sacks, playing inside freaking linebacker most of the time. That's hard. That means attention to detail. That means showing out in practice, guys watching that, or else he wouldn't have been that good. And when he got a blitz opportunity, again, like the Clemson game, he made it happen. These are the kinds of plays that made Florida State a hunter last year until probably midseason. Then everybody's like ready to go after him, and they couldn't get it done. Florida State figured it out in every game. They were hunted by the end of the season, but they had all these seniors across the board that really helped them. And then they had Keon as a junior. They had Trey that was a guy that was just a workhorse running back, et cetera, ready for the NFL. They're losing those guys. The other guy that I think it's interesting that Florida State's losing, and they got the biggest home run at the defensive tackle position in the portal last year, is Fiske. I didn't even realize it when I looked it up. I was like, is that right? 6 sacks, according to CFB stats. Interior D lineman getting pressure. That just, number one, it give credit to the ends for pushing the pocket around the edge and pushing it back up into the pocket. That helps, but getting sacks inside is hard. Fiske was a very difficult player to handle, and he was a big reason Florida State went 13-0 last year. Another guy that does leadership. Never heard anything bad about him. You just heard the announcer say Fiske with the tackle for loss, Fiske with the sack. He just did his job, went back to the huddle, and that was it. He's the definition of leading by example just with that, and that's how you do it. So with these 3 defensive players, here's my question for everybody out there. When you talk about finding a way to be the hunted and handle it, the younger guys that all these players, just among other, there are obviously other good players on Noles defense, how do they take it from last season and push it into this spring ball as guys move up the depth chart? I'm not going to name any names because if I name one person, I already know how this works. I'll get an email or a message or whatever. Well, what about so-and-so? There are numerous opportunities, so I'm just going to leave that open. But which player or players step up to a point where they're not only good or they're top of the depth chart at their respective spot, but they help the team overall in practice, in the meetings, in the weight room, etc. You're going to know that based on the following. This is how you find your answer. There's no hiding here because coaches show their emotions on their sleeves, regardless of how much they hide in their comments. When you see Norvell or anybody else give a press conference or any interview between now and the end of summer, for that matter, when they name position groups, even if they refuse to name players, chances are it's order of operations here, man. The most important who they've been impressed by or what they've been told by the strength coach will go by position and player. It's just true. Those will be the guys that help Florida State and hopefully get them over the top to win a lot of games next year. Defense is going to have to be key because they're not going to score as much losing. We'll talk about offense here in a second. We all know the players that lost. That's a lot of dudes that have a chance to start National Football League games. That's impressive, but at the same time, also it would be just as impressive if you could replace their production, whether with one or more players. So again, I'm looking at the leadership standpoint because if you're going to accept the hunted role, leadership's going to be part of it. There are going to be times you're down in games, etc. Right now, with Florida State spring practice beginning Tuesday, you have to be ready to get that going from practice 1. There won't be any freebies this fall. So with that, please understand that I understand I'm looking way down the road, but I'm just going by what college coaches tell me. This is just me passing along the information. It's not a news flash. If you do not have leadership with the new guys stepping into those roles, you can go from a 13-0 season to 8-5 or whatever it is real quick, because it's not hard to lose your way quickly. Then everybody starts looking at each other in the locker room. Many teams have done it. Some Florida State teams, right around 2020, give or take. Yeah, I would imagine you would know what I'm talking about. When something went sideways, was there enough leadership? No. A lot of it just left the locker room with the talent. I understand that. But it's going to be leadership just as much as that raw skill that's going to get Florida State to the next level. With that being stated, please note on the next part, we're going to talk about a little bit of the offense and a few ideas on how they're going to replace the production just as much as they're going to be able to replace the productivity in the locker room and the leadership roles off the field as well. All right. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys are able to take it to the next level. The Oregon Ducks are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with a power performance in the final Pac-12 tournament, punching their ticket to the big dance. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Ducks have done. Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Also, Fire TV is your destination for sports. Live games or highlights, go in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire Stick, which I personally have used for years, and you can still plug it into your existing TV and get access to millions of movies, episodes, and everything else. Look, if you want a cheaper way to get cable television eliminated from your life, Fire TV Stick is a way to do it. They also have the TVs themselves. Also, they got new Fire TV channels that deliver constantly supply of the latest information on movies, different actors, actresses, anything you can imagine, you can get it. It's kind of like being on YouTube. They have clips, they have shows, they have a little bit of everything, and you can get channels as well. Just say, Alexa, play Fire TV channels. Now we're going to talk about the guys that we got to replace. And I'm going to look at it because I've talked about them so much, a little bit more than I have in the past from a mental standpoint. But at the same time, let's talk about the production. I added it up today. This is because I'm a numbers guy. You can take this any way you want. It wasn't quite as high as I thought on the total touchdowns and everything because Johnny and Keon were honestly banged up for much of the season, especially in the middle part. Here are their combined stats. 91 receptions out of 260 from the Noles. 1,275 yards out of 3,519. But 13 of the 25 receiving touchdowns were from two guys. That's rough. You look at Keon, here's a key way to look at it. Talk about leadership, being a clutch player in the moment. He had 6 passes thrown to him on third downs, according to CFP stats. I'm going to assume that's correct. He caught every one of them, obviously good. 4 of them went for first downs. When you're that clutch, 4 out of 6 getting the first down, that's really, really good. Also, when you look at it, Trey Benson, 906 yards rushing, 14 scores. It was 906 yards of the 2103. So basically about 43% of the rushing yards was from one guy. And here's the other part. That offense really ran with Jordan Travis, not even running as much this past season, anywhere near as much as he did the prior couple seasons. But he still had 7 rushing touchdowns. Florida State's going to have to come up collectively, coaches, players, leadership, the whole nine, on how to be impactful in the run game with DJ Uiagalelei, who's a power guy. Obviously, he's 250 and not a nimble guy. He's just an average speed guy, but big, got a cannon for an arm. Totally different offense, though. It's fascinating. How will they adapt to him and vice versa? Will the leadership around him accept it? Will the players accept it? And can he become a leader? I have more questions than answers by a mile here. And I'm just like anybody else. I need to see it. You should too. Before believing that DJ is going to lead Florida State to a double-digit win season. Could they? Absolutely. Last I checked, I believe FanDuel or one of the sites had the Noles at 9.5 wins was their projected win total over/under. I can see that. I can see that, but I could also see 7. I could also see 11. Like the quarterback position is so different. It's not this that it changed. The playing style is so different. It could go up or down. I have no idea. But again, this is why the spring practice is so important. And if your quarterback is not a leader of some kind, doesn't necessarily be vocal, but if he is not a leader and he's the new guy, how much is that going to work out? And I'm sure you're going to hear all the positive things. Like there's no chance in hell, no matter how bad he does this spring. I'm sorry, this is just true. The Norvell is going to throw him under the bus. I could care less what Norvell says about DJ in any press conference. Zero info. I mean, I'll pass it along here, but coaches know they can't talk bad about their quarterback. Just can't do it. So we're going to have to wait to hear stuff through the grapevine, backdoor intel. Way more important, like a billion times more important. But that's the key here. Can DJ adapt and still become a leader? It's hard. I'm not saying it should naturally happen, but that's important. The second part, and I went over this the other day, Florida State's receivers. Which guy is it, man? I mean, the depth chart is loaded with athletes, but like just, does Ja'Kai Douglas take a role? Does Kentron take a role? Does Hykeem take a role? Does Darion take? I have no idea. It could be Destin Hill. I have no clue. One of those guys, when you lose two NFL receivers, needs to be a leader, and preferably at that spot, I hope it's a vocal one. A lot of receivers today are. That's vital. If you're going to be that guy, it doesn't necessarily mean you got to go out and get 78 catches and 1,060 yards and 12 touchdowns. But you can be somebody everybody respects, holds everybody accountable through spring practice. You're going to hear me say this about 100 times over the next 3 weeks. And then finally, that takes you into the offseason. When you get a little time down, you get to go home and then come back with all the player-led practices. If you don't establish the leadership now, obviously those quarterback deals with running backs, tight ends, and receivers, those are player-led. Coaches cannot mandate them. Receivers got to hold each other accountable to be there on time, stretched, warm, ready, every single rep. I'm telling you, that 9.5 number is probably about right by FanDuel, up or down from where that is, but it can go down real quick if those little things like that with the leadership do not happen. So before I move into the overall theme, one last point here before we go to that. Florida State has the offensive line, and I hate talking about O-line in spring ball, but they've got a mesh, and I've mentioned it a little bit. I'm curious, just kind of thinking about it, is there a guy, even a starter that maybe isn't starting as like at the spot he wants? Do they put the team in front of them? The O-line's got a ways to go. I don't care how much experience it has. I thought, honestly, some of those guys would move on and there'd be some change. More of them came back than I thought. Well, maybe that's a good sign. I thought some guys would take the sure bet on starting somewhere else or just go to the NFL, whatever. But the chemistry needs to be better. And then, of course, they got to be healthier than last year. They had terrible, terrible luck. Surely to God, it'll be better there. If that happens, it'll help all the things I talked about prior, because DJ and them, you're not going to run the ball, pass the ball, whatever, without an offensive line, especially in those big games. I just want to mention that. The big guys don't get enough credit, so just note that I mentioned that. Before I wrap up this show, the next thing I'm going to talk about is arguably the biggest. It is the recruiting. It is the chemistry with the team, the coaches, and everything between now and August. It starts again on Tuesday with the practice and all of that. But if the program is going to be good in 24 and beyond, the next couple of weeks are really important. There are a couple of recruits deciding, etc. All of that's involved. So we're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Seminoles. But right now, we're going to talk about LinkedIn jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. Think about that term, billion, not million, billion, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all this while making the process easy and intuitive. Look, I've used LinkedIn a lot. I'm sure many of you have as well. Whether you're straight out of college looking for an internship, or the other side of it, you're an executive coming back into the business that you were originally at, and now you're the CEO and you've got to find some new people. You can do it really quick because 86% of small businesses, just as an example, get a qualified candidate in one business day. All right. LinkedIn knows what small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have time or resources to hire. This is a great reason to use it because it saves you time and money. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, to finish up here, let's kind of look at it overall. Florida State fans are obviously happy about a 13-0 start to last year. The ending was unfortunate with the injury, etc., to Jordan. But, I mean, compared to where they were, let's just talk about that, going into 23 season to 21 or even the early 22 season. Remember, they lost 3 games in a row. Fact, in the 22 season. That leadership thing, I'm going to say it a gazillion times. I'm going to bore you to death with it because it's just true. If you don't have that 3-game losing streak would have been longer. They wouldn't have got into the right mindset to finish that year. The offseason went good because of that. And then the next season, you go 13-0. Leadership. All that talent works better when you have it. Again, I talked about it early in the show. It's the mesh. And that is why they can still accept, if they do this the right way, starting on Tuesday, being the hunted and not the hunter. It's harder. I get it. Because those teams you play, they're going to have an easier time getting mentally up for the game. They just are. It's Florida State. They're coming off this 13-0 season. They're back. They're a great program again, blah, blah, blah. If you are not down for that, Tallahassee is not the place for you. Even if you're the last guy on the depth chart at any given position. This offseason will be harder mentally for sure. But I can't even put that into a numbers kind of terminology because everybody's going to have them circled. The players may not realize. I guarantee the coaches do. And if they're not, when that first game comes, when that second game comes, when there's a situation where things kind of go sideways, DJ throws these things happen, a pick six or overthrows an easy first down pass, whatever it is. When guys start looking at each other, you'll know things didn't go well now in the spring. Have to be prepared in every single thing they do. I try to bring up these kind of conversations overall whenever I talk to a fan base on any of the Locked On shows that I do a recruiting show with or whatever, because quite frankly, it's still the difference. It's what Saban and Kirby have talked about for years. It's everything that the NFL talks about. Obviously, a certain guy that just left New England for Atlanta, and the NFL talked about. It's motivation. I mean, the players are on the roster by this point. So the talent's there or it's not, whatever. Only thing you can do is get the most out of them. The leadership helps the motivation helps the leadership, and all that together gets you wins. So something to think about as the practices start. And to that point, moving forward, I'll pay attention to what Norvell says, et cetera, after practices. But again, I am very hesitant during spring ball to listen to all the hype. The only thing coaches can really say in spring is positives, other than what maybe mentioning an injury or something. Sometimes they do. I take that with a grain of salt. And for anybody, whether you're reading the Tallahassee Democrat or anything else, nothing against them, quotes are just that. Take them with an enormous grain of salt. The only way, and I know there's not many people have access to this, the only way to really know is to have backdoor sources in the football office or people around it, whatever, because they're not going to tell you a whole lot. We're probably not going to know a ton until a little bit of the spring game stuff comes out, and then more really in the summer. But if the summer is not going well, I guarantee it's because of what happens right now. Everything starts with spring ball. That's why coaches have notoriously forever made spring practice awful, because if you get through that, you get rid of the idiots that don't want to put in the time to say they want to be at a program and wear the fancy helmet. Those players leave, and then the leaders rise to the top, and then your program goes forward. Got to set a standard. That's what spring ball is. So I'm really curious now that everybody's looking at Florida State, in my opinion at least, you can take it however you want, in a different light, because they backed it up last year. They came out in a lot of close games, found ways to win. And when they could put their foot down on somebody's throat, like the LSU game right out the gate, man, they blasted them. That's a mentality that started in spring practice, I guarantee you. So with that, everybody have a great day. Thank you very much. And please like and subscribe to this podcast. Give a 5-star review, the whole 9 yards, and have a great day.